Hello, Gutierrez. Hello, Professor Gutierrez. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, and we're going to be talking about Amazon. So, Amazon has come under quite a bit of scrutiny recently, but I think that I'm leaning to the side of Amazon. So, German, before we talk article, we're going to speak briefly about antitrust legislation. What is antitrust?
Yeah, so the idea of antitrust is a regulation that came into place around the 1920s or a little bit before with the Clayton Act and the Sherman Act that looks to limit the market power that large corporations can have to ensure that consumers and producers benefit from competition in the broader economy. And so it's a set of laws and policies that allow the government to intervene in certain um, corporate decisions such as mergers and acquisition and so on to either give fines or force divestitures between certain companies when there are concerns that they have too much market power and as a result consumer and producer surplus could decrease.
Do antitrust laws work?
Well, I think they certainly worked for a long period of time. I think the laws as written can work. The question is, are we enforcing them strongly enough? And are they keeping up with technological changes where business models can evolve? And so potentially the law becomes antiquated. And so there's some talk from for example, Lina Khan, who's now at the FTC, that argue that some of our laws have become too antiquated and we need to update them and reform the antitrust framework, given the rise of some of the digital platforms.
I agree. I am not in favor of government regulations. There's actually a robust literature arguing against the enforcement of antitrust laws. But Jim, you wrote a piece. Well, you didn't, it's not a piece, it's an academic article, a research piece. So you produce an empirical paper on Amazon, tighter consequences of regulating Amazon. German, more than likely our listeners are aware of Amazon, but tell us, what is Amazon? I like to ask these basic questions. What is Amazon?
Absolutely. Well, Amazon is one of the largest companies in the world. It is a business that started as a retail platform to buy goods online, particularly books at the beginning. It has since grown to offer a wide range of services. But at its core, there's sort of two business models. There's a retail platform that sells goods online and now also owns some real stores like Whole Foods. And then there's AWS, which is both sides of this. My work really focuses on the retail side.
Hello, the German. So for a bit, you were stuttering and I was unable to hear you. So please repeat the answer. I asked a question. What is Amazon? So you have to go over that section.
Absolutely. Well, Amazon is essentially, it used to be the largest company by market value. It is one of the largest companies by market value in the world. And it really has two main businesses. The first is a retail platform that sells goods to consumers, primarily online. And it also owns a fulfillment network to deliver those goods and increasingly real stores. But overall, it's a business that sells goods to consumers, in some cases directly, and in other cases as a marketplace where third-party sellers offer products to consumers, right? That's the side of the business that I think about in my paper. There's a second business that Amazon has, which is the cloud services of AWS, where it sells computing power to companies. So you can think of Amazon as having these two separate business models, both of which have attracted substantial regulatory concern.
What's a third party seller? Sorry, not what. Who's a third party seller and who's a first party seller?
Absolutely. So in the case of Amazon, when you and I go to buy something on Amazon, you can see that some of those goods are sold directly by Amazon. What that means is that Amazon is going to go to a manufacturer, let's say Duracell, is going to buy batteries from Duracell, and it's going to sell them to consumers. In that case, we say that Amazon is a first-party seller because Amazon is selling them directly to us, right? However, on the platform of Amazon, it also allows for third-party sellers, let's say an independent seller like myself. I could go to Duracell, I could buy the batteries from Duracell, and then I could offer them on Amazon. And in that case, we think of that as me being a third-party seller that is selling a good to you when you buy it on Amazon, except that I do that through Amazon, right?
Now, German, some are calling for Amazon to be regulated, but are these calls sensible? Antitrust regulations are interested in price competition, and Amazon has lowered prices.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so are these calls to regulate Amazon sensible? Because Amazon is creating immense value for consumers. Amazon has created thousands of millionaires and built many small establishments.
Yeah, absolutely. So these platform business models, not just Amazon, but really all of them, they can create a lot of value, right? Because it gives us as consumers the access to a ton of sellers, right? And it gives the sellers the ability to sell to many consumers. And that can create a lot of value. It also has a very good distribution network that allows us to get the goods in 2 days. The question of whether there's regulation needed is really a question about, have they now amassed too much market power, and are they using it in a way that is hurting consumers, right? So your intuition is right that, at the beginning and throughout its history, Amazon has created a lot of consumer surplus and consumer value, and we were able to get the goods much cheaper on Amazon before than we were anywhere else. I think the discussion about antitrust is a question of, have we reached the point where Amazon is so big now, right, and it is using its dominance in the market to start raising prices to the point that it no longer creates value, but it's actually extracting a lot of surplus and it's hurting consumers, right? So all this debate on whether or not it should be regulated, it really boils down to trying to measure, right, how much power they have today, how they are using it, and whether they are taking actions, right, that go against the law. So I guess what I would say for the debate is, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of talk, but there's been very little empirical analysis to really understand the business model, really measure how Amazon is behaving, and determining whether that's actually hurting consumer surplus, or it's simply Amazon, growing and starting to extract some surplus, as returns for all the investment that they have done over the last 20 or 30 years.
Amazon is America's most trusted brand. So it's obvious that consumers love Amazon. They even trust Amazon more than how they trust politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so as I say, I'm not really hospitable to these ideas lobbying for regulation of Amazon or any other business that's deemed as too big. But now we're going to get to your paper. Your paper is titled "The Welfare Consequences of Regulating Amazon." It's a new paper. I'm reading the older version published in 2021. Now, German, Amazon Prime. In your article, Amazon Prime has created value, and regulating or banning Amazon Prime will have negative effects. So explain to us, what is Amazon Prime and why would somebody recommend regulating or banning Amazon Prime?
Yeah, so the big regulatory debate is not really much the consumer side, but it's on the seller side. So what regulators are worried about is that Amazon has a lot of market power vis-a-vis third-party sellers, and that allows it to either charge a lot of fees for those independent sellers to sell through Amazon, or it allows Amazon to change the algorithms and the design of its platform to its own advantage, right? To steer buyers towards buying the goods that make a bigger profit for Amazon vis-a-vis third parties, right? The way I think we want to think about whether or not we should regulate, or at least the way I think about it in the model, right, is that Amazon is investing in getting both buyers and sellers on the platform, right? And Amazon Prime is a way in which Amazon invests in getting us consumers, right? Basically, we pay our monthly membership, and then we get 2-day shipping for the entire year. That means that we commit essentially to purchasing on Amazon. And so what we see in the data is that all of these consumers that buy Amazon Prime then start their search. Whenever they wanna buy another good online, they're gonna go straight to Amazon Prime. Right? That tells us that consumers really love Amazon. But on the seller side, right, what happens is that when consumers commit to buying on Amazon, we call that single homing in the platform literature, that gives Amazon a lot of market power over that sellers to offer a product to that consumer, right? Basically, if a seller wants to sell something to me online and I have Amazon Prime and I always buy from Amazon, that allows Amazon to charge a lot of fees to the seller in order to sell to me, right? And that gives it a lot of market power, right? To charge higher fees or to use different algorithms, right? That can create surplus on the buyer side, but it could limit the ability of sellers to sell products to me as a buyer. So the concern for regulation is that if Amazon were to able to amass all the consumers in the economy, let's say, to buy through Amazon Prime and directly to Amazon, then that's going to allow it to raise fees to third-party sellers, and it's going to limit the number of products that I can see on the platform because we're going to have less sellers because they make fewer profits. Right?
So, German, Amazon is a business. Amazon wants to serve its consumers, but like all businesses, Amazon is interested in making a profit. If you're running a business, you're going to implement a fee structure, and that fee structure might be conducive to external sellers, or it might make it more difficult for external sellers to make a profit. So the fact that Amazon has a fee structure that is it as competitive for some external sellers, does that justify regulation?
No, not necessarily. No, I mean, the truth is, get all its consumer base profits, meaning it was putting in all the business, right? And it's only now starting to get some profits and getting some return off of its investments. And so, in a functional economy, we would expect that evolution. We would expect a long period of investment to eventually harvest it, right? So regulation is needed.
German. So I
ahead.
asked a question. Could you start over again? Because for a point you tiptoed. So just start over again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, not necessarily, right? So yes, in a functioning economy, we would expect firms to invest and eventually make profits, right? They're investing in a lot of fixed assets. And in the case of Amazon, what we see is it made almost no profits for the last 20 years, meaning it was putting all of the money back into the business. It built a massive logistics infrastructure throughout the country. And that's why we love Amazon, right? Because it can deliver products to us in 2 days. And now, and so it went almost 20 years with zero profits. And then now it's starting to make some profits. And that's sort of natural, and it's what we would expect in an economy. And it doesn't necessarily call for regulation. Regulation is needed if now that Amazon has amassed this dominant position, it is using in ways that are against the law and that are going to decrease consumer surplus, right? So what we worry about is if Amazon is using its dominant position, let's say, to enter new markets or to kill competitors in ways that violate the law, right? That's when regulation would be needed, not just because, it's charging some fees.
So, Gutierrez, you're an expert. Based on your reading and understanding of literature, are regulations needed?
So what I found on my work, right, I think there's a lot more work that is needed. This is a new literature. Initially, when I came into this project, I thought, absolutely, we're going to need some regulations. We just have to figure out what they will be. Based on my work, I actually found that the incentives of Amazon are such that at this point, regulation would actually not increase consumer surplus, and therefore it would be bad, right? Now, the risk is if Amazon continues to get more and more powerful, there's going to be a point where it's going to want to use that power to extract more surplus. And in doing so, it's going to hurt both buyers and sellers. And at that point, regulation might be needed. But based on my work, and again, there's more that needs to be done. The data I have is not perfect. Regulators can get data from these platforms themselves and do a much richer and more granular analysis. But based on what I know so far, I think regulation, at least the types of regulations that are being proposed, would be premature.
German, how would getting more market power harm consumers? Explain, because if Amazon gets more market power and other companies become competitive, they can undercut the role of Amazon. So as long as the economy continues to produce competitive companies, we don't have anything to worry about. The top companies in 1950 are not the top companies today. So, but how will Amazon's power hurt consumers? Because Amazon is invested in prices for consumers and raising quality. So why would Amazon all of a sudden decide to hurt consumers or charge them higher prices?
Mhm. No, that's a fair point. So to the extent that we can have a competitive market and we have new platforms that are coming in and competing fiercely with Amazon, we would never get to the point where Amazon has so much market power that it's hurting consumers, right? So I think the goal that regulators should have is to preserve competition so that we don't get to that point, right? And by preserving competition, we allow these platforms, to use very rich strategies to invest in logistics. The concern is that because let's say nobody else can deliver a product, all have to buy from Amazon, and Amazon gets to do whatever it wants, right? So, if entry remains and we have firms entering and compete with Amazon. However, some mechanisms in these platform business models, like network effects, like these economies of scales in the logistics platform, that mean that there is a risk that Amazon essentially becomes the only game in town. And then it is not profitable or not feasible for a competitor to come in and actually, compete with Amazon. And then it would have too much power, right? So the question is whether we're at that point or not, right? And from what I learned is I think Amazon is still facing quite a bit of competition in the retail market, right? Walmart is investing a lot on e-commerce. And so we don't see this transition all the way to this very dominant place today. And so if we can continue to sort of foster the entry of these competitors, we would avoid the need for very drastic regulation. But the concern is that, given the economies of scale that are in platform business models, that Amazon has gotten too big too fast, and no one is going to be able to compete with that. That's what regulators are worried about. Lipton, I think I may have lost you again. Hi, Lipton, can you hear me? Hello? I think you're muted now. I don't know. Still can't hear you.
All right, German, I am back. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, I can.
Yeah, so as we were saying earlier, I asked you to explain if these regulations are justified, and you gave a brilliant response, but maybe regulators should talk about Wi-Fi because Amazon was not working, but it's working now. It's working now.
Okay, now I can. I'm gonna turn off my video so that
we can continue the conversation.
Yeah.
So I asked the question and you said companies should invest in resources. You can continue from there because due to the Wi-Fi, you started to stutter for a minute.
Okay, so this was in the last question about
Yes, so I said, are these regulations, I said, how do, based on the performance of Amazon, can be that Amazon will harm consumers in the future? And then you started to speak and you started to stutter. So you can continue from there.
Understood, yeah. So yeah, I guess just to repeat, the question is, are these regulations justified?
Yes.
Yeah.
And why would Amazon really all of a sudden? Because that's not a part of its track record.
Yes. So yeah. So what can happen is that we can have a firm that grows too large and becomes too dominant. And this is particularly a concern in the context of platform business models because we have two particular forces. The first is this network effect, which means that the more sellers are on the platform, the more utility a consumer gets because we can buy more goods. And the more buyers there are, one. And the second one is economies of scale, which means that Amazon has invested a
Okay. So, German?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to wrap up the show because the connection seems to be rather poor. So I'm just going to ask you to explain your conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and just to recap that. So what I was saying is basically there's a concern that Amazon could get too big and it can then start stopping competitors for Inter, and it can start adjusting its algorithms to benefit itself at the expense of both buyers and sellers, right? And if that's the case, right, then there's an incentive to regulate it because we can get buyers and sellers better off, right? Limiting a little bit the profits that Amazon makes. So what I do in my paper is I try to formalize this mechanism and I identify this key parameter that determines whether regulation will improve welfare or decrease it. And those parameters are really how much Amazon is competing for buyers and sellers to use their platforms vis-a-vis other platforms, like I said, Walmart or eBay, right? And what I show is that if Amazon competes a lot with other parties, then allowing its flexibility is going to increase surplus, right? And so regulation of buyers and sellers, right? Sellers on the platform to decrease surplus, and where regulation can actually be justified and it's going to leave everybody better off, right? So I think that at this point, based on my analysis, regulation would not be beneficial, but we can sort of measure this evolution over time. And if we see that Amazon continues to get more powerful, meaning which essentially would happen if Walmart is unable to compete with Amazon, or if any of the retail platforms continue to do worse, and Amazon does better, then there's going to be a point where regulation could be beneficial. Yeah. Hey, Lipton, I think I lost you again. If you'd like, we can try to reschedule to another time when you have better internet. But if not, I think we can leave it at that.